Most men over 35 get completely lost in the gym because they see all of this fancy and expensive kit and think, where the hell do I even start? They look around at the sheer variety and think the answer is more exercises, more variety, more machines. But this is exactly why their training becomes completely random and ineffective. A strong body after 35 is not built by stacking and collecting exercises. More variety does not equal more results. In fact, what if I told you that despite all of the vast amounts of machinery and kit you see inside all of these gyms, there are really only 6 exercises that you need to master if you want to build solid muscle and become that stacked 50-something-year-old that all the young guns in the gym wish was their dad. So let's jump in. Movement pattern number 1 is the vertical push. The vertical push is any movement where you press a load overhead or push upwards against resistance. These are things like overhead press, push press, or landmine press. The muscles recruited are the anterior delt, the medial delt, the upper trapezius, the triceps, and the serratus anterior, as well as the rotator cuff as a stabilizing unit. Overhead pressing movements like these in this vertical press pattern are very, very important if you want to build those shoulders and develop that upper body. But there is one very important caveat to this movement. Due to the modern lifestyle and most men sitting behind desks in this kind of slouched over position, we have lost a lot of the mobility in both the shoulders and the thoracic spine. What this means is pressing overhead can actually become very risky and can leave the shoulders open to injury because most guys over 30 do not have the mobility to press directly overhead without hyperextending from the lower back. So what I strongly suggest you do before you do any overhead pressing movements is test your shoulder mobility and your thoracic mobility by contracting your abs with your back flat against the wall and your feet around 6 inches away from the wall. In that position, with everything contracted and your head also on the wall, just lift your arms up in a straight line and try and get them right above your head. If they won't go fully above your head without you hyperextending from the lower back, then you don't have the mobility to press overhead. In which case, what you should do is press at an angle that matches your own unique mobility with your shoulders and your thoracic spine. What you don't want to see in any movement is this hyperextension where your chest is lifting up, as that simply shows that you don't have the mobility to do that movement. What you absolutely do not want to do is be pressing overhead while leaning back and putting all of the load through that lower back with your pelvis tilted forward, because this is going to put you at risk not just in your shoulders but also in your lower back. Now, here's what a lot of people actually don't know about training overhead pressing movements is that when they are done correctly and with proper scapular retraction and correct posture through the thoracic spine and with the shoulders in the right position, these are actually very, very good for reversing a lot of the negatives from poor posture from sitting down at a desk. So for most men over 35 who are desk workers or who have spent a lot of time in this kind of forward tilting position, these movements are a non-negotiable, but only when they are done properly. This vertical pressing movement is actually one of the few movements that simultaneously strengthens and functionally opens the shoulder complex. So it's a non-negotiable and should be part of your routine. So when you're selecting exercises in this vertical press pattern, think about things like dumbbell overhead press, barbell overhead press, machine overhead press. There are literally endless variations of this movement pattern, and just knowing the pattern that you're working in will help you select which ones for which workout. Movement pattern number 2 is the reverse of the previous one, vertical pull. This is where you're pulling down in this pattern. Think movements like pull-ups, like lat pull-downs. These movements are going to target primarily the lats, the biceps, the rhomboids on your back, and the lower traps. As the lats in particular, which are the largest muscle in the upper body, will take a lot of the load during these pull-down movements. They also attach into an area of the lower back called the thoracolumbar fascia, which means lat strength directly contributes to spinal stability. So it's not just about aesthetics, it's also about the health and function of your body. A man who cannot pull his own body weight for reps does not have adequate lat development. And inadequate lat development means inadequate spinal support, which can be a major issue as you age. After 40 years of age, the vertical pull is also one of the most effective movements for reversing the anterior dominance pattern. Due to the modern lifestyle, most men have far too overdeveloped pressing muscles relative to the pulling muscles because the gym culture has always rewarded bench press numbers over everything else. As well as the fact that we sit behind a desk in this kind of forward tilted position and constantly looking down at our phone, which all drives our posture into this forward tilt. This imbalance over years creates internal rotation at the shoulder, impingement, and rotator cuff vulnerability. Vertical pulling corrects that ratio when programmed with at least a 1-to-1 pull to push ratio. And ideally, what you would preferably do is a 2-to-1 ratio in favor of pulling for men with existing postural issues, which, let's face it, is most men these days. When it comes to pulling movements, the list really is endless. Think pull-ups, think lat pull-downs, think single arm pull-downs, think anything where you have your arms above your head and you are pulling down towards your upper body, or like I said, pulling your upper body to the bar like you do with pull-ups. Now, the thing with these movements is similar to the overhead pressing movements is you also want to push within your own unique range of movement, which will be determined by your thoracic mobility and also your shoulder mobility. So you want to do the same test to identify what your active range of movement is for the pull down movements. That's where you stand against the wall, contract your abs, make sure your low back is flat against the wall, feet 6 inches away, and you test how far you can get above the arm without compromising your posture. Do that first, and then make sure all of your pulling movements are in that same pattern. So if you're looking to develop that width with your back, where you can see the wings here hugging your t-shirts, then pulling down movements like this are a non-negotiable to include in your regime. Movement pattern number 3, the horizontal push. The horizontal push is things like bench press, press up, dumbbell chest press, cable press, anything that is pressing in this horizontal pattern here. The primary muscles you will work in this movement is going to be your pecs, your anterior deltoids, and your triceps. Now, this is the most overtrained pattern in the gym. There's no doubt about it. Most men over-allocate volume here and under-allocate volume everywhere else. And that creates asymmetries that can create real problems long-term. But the horizontal push movement is essential. It's not optional. Loaded horizontal pressing recruits significant volume of upper body muscle mass. It also drives testosterone and growth hormone response when loaded sufficiently and maintains pressing strength, which is directly associated with functional independence as you age. It's a very important movement, but you don't want to overtrain this. The key for everyone when training this is your shoulder position. Make sure you have a slight retraction of your scapula before pressing and control through the full range of movement. This prevents the anterior capsule stress that leads to shoulder impingement down the line. Look, you don't need me to motivate you to get in the gym and train your chest. That's probably the one movement you've already overtrained by now. But next time you're in the gym, when you're trying to select which exercise is best for your chest, rather than thinking of individual exercises, think of the movement pattern. You can select things like a cable press, even a cable fly. You can use a chest press machine. You can use a barbell press. You can use a dumbbell press. The thing is, they all train in the exact same movement. They are all variations of this horizontal press movement. Movement pattern number 4, the horizontal pull. The horizontal row is the mirror of the horizontal push. Barbell rows, dumbbell rows, cable rows, inverted rows, the list goes on. Any movement where you are pulling a load from in front of you towards your body in that horizontal pattern. The primary muscles in this movement are going to be things like your rhomboids, your middle trapezius, your rear deltoids, your biceps, and your erector spinae as a stabilizer. This is often one of the most neglected patterns in male training, and the cost can be significant long term because without adequate horizontal pulling volume, the mid-back becomes structurally weak. The thoracic spine then starts to round with the shoulders protracting into this forward position. Posture then deteriorates visibly, and with it, the mechanical position of every other lift becomes compromised. Research on scapular stability shows that weakness in the middle and lower trapezius is a primary contributor to shoulder pain and rotator cuff pathology in active males. Horizontal pulling directly targets those stabilizing muscles. So if you're currently doing more sets of bench press per week than your rows, or more sets of horizontal pressing than horizontal pulling, then the balance is wrong. That is not my opinion, that is simple mechanics. And if you keep up that ratio towards more pushing movements and less pulling movements, then you're going to create issues for yourself down the line. So if you're in the gym thinking, which rowing movements should I be doing? Well, the truth is, it doesn't really matter as long as you pick a specific movement in that horizontal pattern and you are doing it consistently. The options really are endless. You can do single arm cable rows. You can do double arm cable rows. You can do prone dumbbell rows. You can do machine chest supported row. The key with all of this is you select movements in that pattern and then you stay consistent long term to progress and get stronger. Movement pattern number 5, the squat. The squat pattern is any movement where you lower the hips through knee flexion under load. These are things like back squat, front squat, goblet squat, but also your single leg movements like lunges, Bulgarian split squats, or anything that is in that pattern where you are bending the knee and bending the hip at the same time. The primary muscles working in this pattern are the quadriceps, the glute med and the glute maximus, the adductors, the hamstrings, and also the erector spinae and your core stabilizing muscles too as secondary muscles. The squat is the most complete lower body pattern movement in existence. It recruits more total muscle mass than any other single lower body exercise, and muscle mass is the single most important physical variable for metabolic health after 40, which is why it needs to be in your regime. Squatting is without a doubt one of the most human movements that we should all be able to do. And developing your strength in this movement isn't just important for aesthetic reasons to build the lower legs, but also for health and mobility as you age. It is absolutely essential that you can perform this movement. To add to this, after 40, sarcopenia, which is the age-related loss of muscle mass, begins at a rate of approximately 1% per year if not actively opposed. And how you oppose that is by training those muscles and developing tissue. The squat pattern, loaded progressively, is the most direct intervention against sarcopenia in the lower body. Now, here's the thing. There will be a lot of men watching this who get sore knees and claim that they can't do a barbell back squat. And that's absolutely fine because there are so many other variations which will save those knees and allow you to perform the same pattern. What a lot of guys don't realize is the leg press is just a squatting movement. It's the same with a slightly different position. As I said before, things like split squats, things like Bulgarian split squats, things like goblet squats, which are much safer variations of the squat pattern, most people can do with the right posture and position. Think about the movement pattern that we are performing when leg pressing. We are simply getting a bend at the hips and we're getting a bend at the knees, which is exactly the same as when you're doing a back squat, just slightly different in its position. So if you do find that you have knee pain or you find that you simply can't achieve that squatting pattern properly, the answer is not to skip squats altogether. It is to find a variation that matches your current mobility and progress from there. Movement pattern number 6, the hip hinge. The hip hinge is the most biomechanically important movement pattern for men over 40 and also the most commonly absent. A hip hinge is any movement where you load the posterior chain by pushing the hips back while maintaining a neutral spine. Think movements like deadlifts, Romanian deadlifts, kettlebell swings, good mornings, or hyperextensions on a Roman chair. The primary muscles working in this movement pattern are your hamstrings, your glutes, your erector spinae muscles, your multifidus, and the glute med on the outside too. The posterior chain is the engine of the male body. Glutes and hamstrings drive athletic output, protect the lumbar spine, and are the primary movers in everything from lifting to sprinting to simply rising from a chair without pain. In fact, lower back pain, which affects over 80% of men at some point in their lives, is in the vast majority of cases a posterior chain weakness problem, not a structural problem. Men will load their lumbar spine with poor mechanics because their glutes and hamstrings are not strong enough or coordinated enough to take the load. And because of this, the vertebrae and discs pay the price. The hip hinge pattern teaches the body to load the posterior chain correctly. It takes stress off the lumbar spine and puts it where it belongs. 3 to 4 sets of Romanian deadlifts per week, progressed over months, will do more for your lower back resilience than any amount of stretching or physiotherapy in isolation. Now, let me quickly show you how this pattern should look using a simple stick like this as a cue. So when you're doing a hinge movement, what is really, really important is that the bend is coming at the hip, not at the lower back. So how you can train this is by using a stick like this and putting it down the back of your body. Now it should be in contact with 3 points on your back: the coccyx at the top of your glute, the thoracic spine, and the back of your head. Once the stick is in contact with all points, what you are then going to do is bend your legs slightly and then push your bum all the way back, making sure the stick remains in position there. Once you have this position, you're going to squeeze your glutes, and that is your hinge movement locked in. If at any point the stick comes away from those positions, you know your posture has become compromised. So now you can see that despite it looking like you have all of this crazy variety when you step in the gym, realistically 90% of the exercises you do will all be in one of these 6 movement patterns. So all you really need to do is master these 6 movements and you will have mastered the lot. So if you start thinking about training movement patterns rather than training individual exercises, everything becomes so much clearer and the results will come so much faster. Let me show you how easy this becomes once you understand these patterns. Here we have a horizontal pull movement working the back. Here we have a vertical pull movement pulling down, working the lats primarily. Here we can mix things up. We can have horizontal pressing, we can have horizontal pulling, we can have vertical pulling, we can have a whole mix of stuff. Here we have horizontal pressing, primarily working the chest. It all gets very, very easy once you've spent a bit of time in here understanding these patterns. We have a vertical pull down movement. I'm going to come to this movement in a second because this one's slightly different. Same with this one. Here we have a squat movement. Here we have a hinge movement. So you can see it doesn't take a lot of thought to be able to tell you exactly what we're working. Here we can do overhead pressing, we can do hinge movements for the deadlift, we can do squatting movements. Again, the list is endless with movements like this. Over to the leg press here, we have a squatting movement. We can do that single-legged, we can do that double-legged. And then over to the free weight section, we have, endless options to train with. But you notice when you begin to get this clear on the different movement patterns, you can handpick exercises very, very easily to make sure you are equally hitting every single pattern. And when you have this level of clarity around the movement patterns that you are working within, rather than just the individual exercises, it becomes very, very easy to equally balance your workout to make sure you are getting a full variation of each pattern and developing a symmetrical and functional physique. With all of this, here is exactly what to do next. If you're already following a training plan, give it an audit. Write down every exercise that you've done in the last 2 or 3 weeks of training. Then assign each one to one of these 6 patterns: vertical push, vertical pull, horizontal push, horizontal pull, squat, or hip hinge. If any of those patterns has 0 or 1 exercise assigned to it, there is a gap that you need to fill. That gap is likely the reason that your training has stopped producing results, or your posture is declining, or you have a specific area of your body that is chronically uncomfortable. Step 2, start prioritizing the missing patterns first. Do not add new exercises on top of what you are already doing, just replace. If you are doing 3 sets of bicep curls and 0 rows, the curls need to go. If you are doing 4 sets of bench press and no overhead press, reduce the bench volume and add some vertical pushing. Step 3, build your sessions around 2 to 3 patterns each. A practical 3-day structure looks like this. Session A, working vertical push, horizontal pull, and hip hinge. This might look like shoulder press with dumbbells, machine shoulder press, wide cable row, prone dumbbell row, deadlift, and hyperextensions. Session B, working the squat, plus the vertical pull, plus the horizontal push. This might look like dumbbell split squats, leg press, lat pull down, machine pull down, dumbbell chest press, and cable chest press. Then session C, training the horizontal push, the hip hinge, and the vertical pull. You might choose exercises like single arm pull down, wide grip upper back pull down, RDLs with dumbbells, bench press, and inclined dumbbell press. You can then add one bonus exercise onto these workouts that falls outside of the 6 patterns, because although they are few, they are also important and they still matter. For example, you could add standing calf press to the end of session A, seated hamstring curl to session B, and leg extension or lateral dumbbell raise to session C. With all of these workouts, just start with 2 working sets on each exercise and build from there. What you may notice is that pulling appears in every session in this particular split, and that is because it corrects the anterior dominance pattern that years of press-focused training and modern lifestyle has created. Look, thanks for watching today's video. I really appreciate your support, and if you want to stay tuned for more videos just like this one on what it takes to build and maintain a strong physique after 35, then hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.